Welcome back to Just Kampers. Now today I'm going to be investigating an oil leak on a 1967 Beetle. So I took an initial look and there seemed to be quite a lot of oil around the oil switch. So I cleaned it up, we've replaced the oil switch, and then we still had oil emerging. So at a closer look I could see the oil was running down behind the fan cowling and onto our engine assembly. So unfortunately it's engine out because I think the oil leak's coming from inside the fan housing. The only thing inside the fan housing that can cause our oil leak is the oil cooler. So that's where we're going to start. So I'm going to take the engine out. So our engine's removed and our fan housing's removed. Now it's really simple to remove these engines from the car. They're only held onto the gearbox via 4 studs. So we have one either side at the top, a stud comes through here and here, with a 17mm headed nut and washer. So we remove those, and you can gain access from behind our fan cowling when it's in situ. There's 2 studs that come through here and they protrude through our gearbox bell housing, again with a 17mm headed nut and a washer on there. The next thing to remove would be our heater cables. So we have one each side, remove that, and also remove our heater ducting. Then all we have left is our fuel pipe, so we disconnect him from our fuel filter, and that's pretty much the back end done. And then as we come back round to our engine bay side, remove the front part of your tinware. Then we have wiring that comes across to our alternator, which would be situated here. Again, undo the wiring and just move it out of the way. Disconnect the battery first, obviously, because you have a live there. There's a throttle cable that comes through our heater, through our fan cowling to our carburetor. So we remove him and withdraw him from behind. And then there's a conduit that goes through the fan housing, so we pull that out too. With the fan cowling removed, I can gain access to our oil cooler, which is situated here. Now, as you can see, it's pretty oily, and we've had oil leaking out of this oil cooler and running down this side and running down this side too. That was where I could see the oil leak from when it was in the car. So I'm going to remove this and have a look and see why it was leaking. I've undone the nuts. There's a nut at the front there, and then there's 2 further around at the back underneath. I've undone those too. So let's get the cooler off and see why it was leaking. And all we have left is our oil switch wiring. So we disconnect our oil switch wiring, pull him out, and then our ignition feed to our coil. And that's it for wiring, and then we can wiggle him out. So we gently start pulling him forward and drop him down. And you can do that on either, we've got a stand with some wheels on it that goes up and down, or you can use a trolley jack. I've cleaned and checked our oil cooler, and I'm really happy with the cooler itself and that we found the leak at the seals. So you can test these yourselves, or you can send them away to get them tested. You can fill them with compressed air and see if they're leaking. Again, can be quite difficult. If you're in any doubt whatsoever, then just replace your oil cooler. There's no point putting back an oil cooler that could potentially leak. So I've left this draining for some time, and it's nice and clean, and it's not leaking. So we can get this back together with our fresh seals. All nice and clean and ready to put our fan housing back on. Just disconnect these HT leads and get these out of the way first. So we'll take a bit of care in sliding over our oil cooler and get our alternator past the carburetor. We should be able to get... Making sure our tinware goes the right side. So there's 2 fixings, one either side, that goes through the tinware with a captive nut, and then there's this clamp. This clamp goes round our alternator and to the alternator pedestal. So we just slide that back. Now I can do that up. One thing that is worth a mention is these warm-up flaps. Now these have been disconnected, so they're left open all the time. But yours, you may still have your control rod and your bellows that controls these warm-up flaps. Now if you have, you'll have to disconnect your bellows from underneath. It'll be situated under here with a 13mm headed bolt. You'd have to undo that before you could take your fan housing off. So while our engine is out, I'm going to replace the clutch. So I've got our special tool in here which bolts through and holds our flywheel in place. If you haven't got a special tool, then you can use like a bent valve or something else to jam in between the flywheel and say the lower stud, for instance. And that just keeps that sturdy and solid so I can undo the clutch bolt. Now our clutch assembly is removed, we can take a closer look at our flywheel. Make sure we haven't got any high spots, make sure we haven't got any cracks. Give it a good clean up before we fit our new clutch. First thing I'm going to do is just feed a little bit of grease into our spigot bearing. Not loads of grease because we don't want it flung everywhere all over the clutch. A little tiny bit on my finger. I'm just going to work that into the bearing. It's a roller pin type bearing, so it needs a bit of lubrication in there. So okay, that's the grease done. Okay, let's get our clutch kit on. So our centre plate, it does only go one way, and actually written on the front of the clutch here it says gearbox side. So gearbox side is this side, so it's going to fit in there like that. I'm going to loosely put the bolts in. Now I'm not going to put any pressure on this pressure plate yet, I'm literally just winding the bolts in so they touch, because what I want to do is be able to centre our centre plate using the clutch aligning tool, and then we can tighten up around the outside. Make sure the clutch still moves. Yeah, okay, so we slide our clutch aligning tool in. Now our clutch aligning tool will locate with the bearing in the back and locate with the centre friction plate and line up. There we go. Lovely. So that's it. So that's our clutch centred, and now we can do up around the outside. And when we tighten our clutch, we need to keep it nice and even. Like so. And if you want to, you can use a torque wrench. Or you can do it by hand. The last piece of our clutch puzzle is our release bearing. Now I put a little bit of copper grease on the ears here where it sits and on our splines. The release bearing is held on with a clip, a sprung type clip. See if I can show you this side. So I've got one side in, this side pushes in, and then just simply twist it round the back and it clips into place. Just double check that's in the right place. Yeah, it looks good. With our oil cooler seals replaced, our new clutch kit on, Our release bearing on the car, we're ready to put the engine in. Well, that's that job finished. Road tested, leak free, very pleased. For more how-to videos or hints and tips, visit us at justkampers.com or follow us on Facebook or YouTube.